Welcome back to the Keep Going podcast with Vin Kennedy. I'm your host, Vin Kennedy. Today we have a special guest. This is Nick. Nick, you want to do a brief intro on yourself?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm super excited for this. My name's Nick Mullery. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, owner of Continuum Sports Rehab and Performance in Fairhaven, New Jersey. I help people overcome injuries. I work with a lot of athletes, specifically runners. So that's kind of where I'm finding myself right now, is figuring out the whole business side of things, but still trying to help people overcome their injuries, get back to running and things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, just becoming a doctor, obviously, you're fairly young, so it's tough to kind of navigate that. How was that? What was that experience like? And we talked a little before that. It was quite the journey.
Yeah. I mean, it was like really long during it. Yeah. But like looking back, it was like went by so fast. But I kind of always, this is like very strange, I think, but I kind of always knew what I wanted to do from a pretty young age. I think I was like 15 when I decided I wanted to become a PT. Mm-hmm. So I never really thought about doing anything else. So I just went to, I applied to college for physical therapy and I went straight through. And like I said, during it was long and grueling at times. But yeah, in hindsight, pretty quick,
Yeah. What kind of like sparked that? Because I know personally, like even being in PT offices, like when I was younger, I was like, this is cool. Like this is a cool job. Like this is a cool environment to be in. But what was like your experience? Did you have an injury?
I didn't. So again, kind of a weird way of stumbling upon it. I think that's kind of the classic case. Is like, get hurt, go to PT, realize, wow, this like changed my life. I overcame my injury, and I'm inspired. I want to do that. Not the case for me. My freshman year of high school, we had presentations to do in like one of our science classes, I think, and the presentation was on like the health or like medical field, like a profession in the field. And a girl in my class did physical therapy. I think her parents were physical therapists, and she just had a pretty compelling presentation. I think like one of the stats was like it's the most, or one of the most satisfying career paths for people. Like they polled people, and I was like, all right, that sounds good. And you get to work with like active people, like that's great. I was into sports. I like imagined myself working with athletes and things like that. And I knew I was the type of person that couldn't sit behind a screen and be like a desk jockey and like crunch numbers on Excel. So I definitely just kind of gravitated towards that. And like I said, never really thought about anything else.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. You gotta wonder like where she's at. She had to become like a lawyer or something. She's very convincing.
Right, yeah, for sure. And I don't know, but she sure made an impact on me.
Yeah. And then so how did that kind of spark where you're at today and obviously having Continuum?
Yeah, so when I was finishing up PT school, I was like getting ready to graduate. I think it was 6 months or a year before I was ready to graduate. I stumbled upon an entrepreneur, like a physical therapy entrepreneur, which I don't even think I knew what an entrepreneur was. I don't even think I knew the definition of it until then. But I stumbled upon him. I like started following him on social media. He had a podcast I started listening to. And it just kind of like that again, like lit a spark and like made me think, all right, this guy seems like he's got stuff figured out. It seems like he's crushing life. He's a physical therapist, but he's autonomous. Like he controls his own schedule and the way he wants to do things. I'm like, that's how I imagined this. And to back it up a little bit too, once I got into PT school and like in the weeds, in the nitty gritty, like doing my internships and stuff, I realized that the field isn't exactly what I thought it was. And it's not what it's always like made out to be. So, certain things like being able to treat the way you want or the people you want is like super hard to come by if you just kind of enter the field as an employee.
Right.
So I felt like that was my way to get what I wanted. And so I didn't pursue it immediately after graduating, but that's kind of how I got the idea.
And then so what did that look like navigating, like kind of getting to where you are today? Because obviously like the hurdle of, I'm sure it sounds like you went into something that was more structured, more almost like the safer play.
Yeah, for sure. So when I graduated, I did take a job working at like a stand. It was kind of a chain place, but it was safe and it was good. It was like I wanted to get my feet wet and those kinds of things. But and I always still had in the back of my mind I wanted to start my own thing. But it was actually the pandemic that I think created a lot of opportunities for a lot of people if you gave it that chance to.
Yeah.
So I got furloughed. I was home for 6 weeks doing nothing, and I kind of alluded to like my personality a little bit already, but like doing nothing inside for 6 weeks just like didn't sit right with me.
Yeah.
So I like in that time started looking up like, all right, how do I create a business? How do I like get an LLC? What do I have to do? Like implementing these things. So I did that, and I started kind of just like doing my own thing. I did take another job in the meantime while I was kind of creating and building this. So I had my own thing on the side for probably about a year, just juggling both like a full-time job and like a side hustle. And then when I met my partner Brian, he was looking to expand his business, which was very similar to what I was doing in my side hustle. And I was looking to take my side hustle full-time. So it made sense for us to kind of join forces. We were both had the same philosophy with what we wanted and how we wanted to operate things. So it just made sense.
Yeah.
And from there, we started Continuum together. Well, he started it, but I joined him, and we kind of joined forces, and that's how we got here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And I think like a lot of that speaks to like who you are, because people would look at it almost as like, I mean, you definitely go further together, but people kind of look at things as competition rather than like just joining forces and like going hand in hand. And then even tying in with that is like, I personally found myself in this, like, when you get in that like entrepreneur mindset, it's almost like I can never go back to a 9 to 5. Like I can never go back to like being paid again. But it's like taking ego out of it and like understanding that stringing it together and piecing it along to get to where you ultimately want to go is way more important than, like the finite time of right now and having like extreme control kind of.
Yeah. And I recognize that. Like initially, I have to admit, I was like a little resistant.
Yeah.
I mean, he reached out to me, and I was like, oh, this guy's kind of like my competition in the area.
Right.
Like what? I was like, what does he want to do? He wants to collaborate? How?
Yeah.
But no, ultimately, I saw it as like an opportunity again for me to go full time with doing things the way I want to do them. And it was my opening, and I took it, and like, super happy I did, because now I can't imagine going back to a 9 to 5 like you mentioned. So I mean, it was a great choice, definitely. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And then going back to something you said earlier too, is like obviously being a PT, there's other PTs. Same with like being a gym owner, there's other gyms, and everybody kind of fixates on that like competing for clients rather than like you said, where it's like, I get to work with the people that suit me, like that you can serve and best suit you, rather than like, trying to take from the masses. It's like, no, I need to serve the people that I could serve.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad you said that, actually, because this is something I, again, more recently have been like opening my eyes to.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I guess I am a competitive person where like I see everybody as like, all right, that's my competition. I got to do better than him. I got to do better than him. Like I got to eat. But for sure, like everybody has something to offer, and what I have to offer isn't for everybody.
Right.
And the people who are drawn to me and what I have to offer may not be into what everybody else has to offer. So every gym isn't the same. I mean, not all gyms are created equally. Not all restaurants are created equally. So I kind of view it that way now. Like, if I'm like an Italian restaurant, I'm Italian, so of course, but if somebody wants to eat Italian, they come to my restaurant. If somebody wants Mexican, they wouldn't be coming to my restaurant. So I kind of definitely see things more like that now too. And I think it helps becoming more collaborative with other business owners as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really like where that stems from, and like the negative side would be like the scarcity mindset, right? Of like, that's almost money walking out the door rather than like, well, wait a minute, like we're helping and serving people. This isn't just about the finances. I think that's really where it like stems from.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then how important is like the right partnership? So obviously like you guys have a partnership here, and then the spin-off question would be like, and I know obviously you're married as well, so like how would you kind of navigate the importance of like relationships in your life?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. because I think there are a lot of parallels with those two relationships. Obviously marriage, like you're locked in, that person is your person for, till death do you part, you say your vows. And although business, it may not necessarily be like as binding as that, it certainly is damn close. So you definitely have to make sure that you get to know the person that you're becoming a partner with, and things like that. But I do have to say I took a bit more of a chance going into business partnership than I did with marriage. I guess you can kind of say like we skipped the dating phase and went right to marriage and for business. But ultimately, through our conversations, we realized that we have the same vision, we're pulling in the same direction, but we have complementary skill sets. And I think that was one of the biggest things, was that we were similar enough to be on the same team, but different enough that we weren't going to be, conflicting or, really good at one thing and not knowing how to do another. So it's been great so far.
Do you think those roles kind of like set themselves when you guys came together, or was that stuff that you had to like establish and you kind of have like firm lines with?
Yeah, a little bit of both, I think. Just kind of, getting to know Brian and him getting to know me, we realized that, we do have different strengths and weaknesses. And I think we both recognized that initially too, and realized that, okay, this probably would be a good idea then. But, obviously once we became a team officially, we definitely split up roles so that it was kind of clear, like, all right, we're both going to work together on things, but, ultimately, marketing, falls on your shoulders. Sales falls onto my shoulders, operations, whatever. So we did split up our roles. So we know like who is almost the lead in some things, and the other maybe the supporter, but ultimately, again, we both collaborate on pretty much everything. Yeah.
And I'm single, but that sounds like something that would be beneficial in a a love relationship as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Not that you don't love Brian, I'm just saying.
A lot of parallels though, for sure. And the communication, I think is super important. Being able to communicate, like, all right, I'm going to do this. Like, maybe you can support me with this, but like ultimately, this is my job, it's my responsibility, and I think that goes a long way too. Yeah,
absolutely. And what's some like tough adversity that you faced in life physically and then mentally, and like what was that like?
Yeah. Well, I guess this might be a little bit of recency bias because it just happened this weekend. But the marathon, I mean,
that's what I was alluding to.
I ran my first marathon this weekend, and I knew it would be like a daunting task, and training would be tough and all those things, and I knew I put in the work, to get there. But being in the race and hitting miles that you haven't hit before, and kind of getting into the unknown. Was definitely a challenge physically. My body was feeling it, but mentally as well too. I kind of mentioned to you before we started recording, like, you get the thoughts that creep into your mind, like, why did I do this? Why am I here? I don't belong here. I could stop right now, give up, those kinds of things. But as soon as those thoughts creep in, I'm like, no, that's exactly why I'm here. I'm here so that these thoughts creep in, and I decide to continue on and finish this thing like I said I would. That was both physically and mentally way more challenging than I thought it would be.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Did you find any parallels with like running and entrepreneurship through training?
Yeah, I mean, yes, and I could give you an example. I had set out like a 20-mile run for myself, like a training run, and I was going into it. I was a little bit sick the week before, but I was like, I got to get it done. Like, this is one of those things that's on the calendar. I got to get it done, and I failed it. I didn't get 20. I got 15, and I tapped out. I was like, this isn't going to go my way. And a lot of those like ups and downs do happen in business too. Like you always have to push forward, and you think it's kind of your duty to be like, well, it doesn't matter like what my excuses are, I just have to go. But sometimes you're gonna get like punched in the mouth too, and you're gonna realize like, all right, maybe I just need to like take a breath, reassess the situation here, and time when I want to actually give my bigger efforts a little bit better. So that's one example that I think I could use to draw a parallel there.
I think it's so important. It's just like the constant forward motion, even if that means going slower at times, for sure. Yeah. And I think, and that also goes back to partnership, right? Where it's like if you have someone else to lean on, you could kind of get that nudge you might need from behind.
Yeah. Accountability is a huge thing with partnerships too. I mean, that's one thing I noticed once we did partner is that, you know, I do struggle with like taking action sometimes. Like I love like theorizing and like planning and researching, but sometimes I'm pretty poor at actually implementing. And knowing that someone else is relying on you for the implementation of all these things lights a fire. And yeah, that's definitely been one thing that I for sure noticed.
Yeah, it's so funny. And it's just funny how like people are different, like inherently and in general. And like hearing you say that, I smiled. I don't know if Nick was smiling, but like I'm super impulsive. Like I have no problem doing. I struggle with like, I'll start something today. I might not redefine it and like really like make it perfect for a bit.
Right. So
I think that's So you do need those two people to kind of come together for sure.
And that's one of the things too that we're like complementary with me and Brian is like he's I guess more similar to you, like impulsive, like all right, we need to do this, let's do it today. And I'm more so like, well, you know, maybe we should think about another option too, and like really debate which one's the best to do. And so I think that balance has kind of helped both of us in a way too. But it's just it is funny that people have different like minds when it comes to that stuff.
It really is. And then to kind of switch gears a little bit, like what is a common, you said you deal with a lot of runners, like what's the most common injury you see for runners and what's the number one thing they can do to prevent it?
Yeah, so with runners, I mean, obviously everything is, pretty much like lower body stuff, waist down. So to say like what is the most common is kind of hard to say, but I would go with just like general knee pain. A lot of running injuries aren't like traumatic injuries. Like not a lot of people are like tearing their ACL, running. A lot of them are overuse. Which is a conversation that I have with a lot of people when we're rehabbing and getting back to things is if your injury occurred because you were running a bit too much or like weren't balancing, like I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit probably, but strength training and running or mobility training and running, then at a certain point you may exceed your body's capacity of your joints or tendons or muscles and an injury occurs. So a lot of my conversations are about balancing all of those things as we're building back up from an injury to prevent it from happening again. Because a lot of people, when they do get hurt, they take some time off, they rest because they can't really run.
Right.
But then after the pain goes away, they ramp up a little bit too quickly without like a methodical plan. And I think that's where a lot of people do fail and end up having recurring injuries.
Yeah, for sure. And this is something that I always think about, like for my end of like, just in my mind, I've taken a lot of like nutrition advice.
Yeah.
Do you ever get like information overload? Like you almost know too much for yourself. Like during prep, I'm sure you probably had an aggravating injury and you're like, oh, this is that, what I mean? Something that you've read or.
Yeah. I mean, I won't say I'm like a hypochondriac, but I think to your point, I am a bit more aware of like, all right, well, how much am I pushing things? Like you feel aches and pains when you're like pushing yourself. So I'm a little bit more hyper aware. I think of like, all right, was that just an ache because like I ran a little faster today, or is that like something that's been brewing that I should like worry about?
Right.
So I think I'm a little like hyper vigilant when it comes to those things, which maybe can cause me to be a bit reserved sometimes, and a little bit more conservative. But it's something that is kind of always like looming back there. It's like, all right, well, I definitely don't want this to become worse, you know, and take steps to prevent that.
Yeah, I feel like there's like in certain areas and certain things, like it's almost a blessing to be a little naive because there's just no worry. Like you don't have to even think about it.
Exactly,
For
and
sure.
I think I do have, some difficulty with like, pushing through like, that pain cave a little bit. 'Cause it's like, well, I know this is, from my education, like this is the danger zone of like where shit can start going wrong.
Right.
Like, I don't know how long I want to spend in here. So like, I do have that battle where it's like, I want to pull back because I know it's probably the smart thing to do, but also like I have goals and I want to like move towards them. And sometimes you have to get uncomfortable and, get comfortable being in that, pain cave, and so to speak. So yeah, that is a bit of a struggle for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then you alluded to it earlier. So like, how important is strength training mixed with running and like kind of just being a balanced overall athlete?
Yeah, I mean, I think strength training is for everybody. That's a blanket statement, but I can't think of many situations where like that isn't an amazing form of exercise and health. And especially when you are running, I mean, the statistics show that you absorb like 2 to 3 times your body weight with every step while you're running. And if you think about like marathon training or even like ultra marathon distances, how many steps are you taking in that training or in that race? And each step is 2 to 3 times your body weight. Like that's a lot of force and a lot of stress going through, your lower extremities. So to prepare your body for that, yes, you have to run, but strength training is something that can decrease your risk of injury and improve your performance too. I mean, it can make you faster, it can make you hit your times better, and it can keep you injury free. So I stress that to pretty much everybody that I work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's your take on like ultra running, like 100-mile races? Because like you have to have like it's just, I mean, it's almost like stupid on your end, right? Like it just doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is a very rare thing because of how much you have to push your body, past its limits. So I think it's a little, it's probably a little naive to say like, oh yeah, we're gonna prevent injury for this ultra runner. Like, it almost comes with the territory to an extent. And not that everybody gets injured doing it, but the risk is certainly significantly higher than something less extreme. So I think the approach with that, and from working with a few ultra runners already, the approach is let's just feel as good as possible and get to the start line of the race at 100% or as close to it as possible. You can't expect to be 100% all the time, especially after a 100 or 200-mile race, because that's just insane how much stress you're putting your body through. But I think when you're competing in those spaces, getting to the start line at 100% is really critical.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I feel like the most common injury, and I had someone hit me up today about this, is shin splints. Like, how do you navigate shin splints for people?
Yeah, so shin splints are a little bit complex just because that's more of an umbrella term for a couple different things that could be going on. So the first kind of plan of action would be to identify like what's causing it. And that could be anything from overtraining, like I said, gait mechanics, footwear, and other things too. So getting to the root cause of it and then trying to intervene where necessary is the key there. But that is a little bit complex. Like it's not always just one thing.
Yeah, so the buddy I'm referring to runs in like the very minimal shoes. So it's like it could definitely be that mixed with like you're just getting into running. Yeah.
Right. So those two things are like just getting into running, like ramping up volume quickly could do it. And minimalist shoes, like if they have like a low stack and not a lot of cushion to absorb all these forces that I've talked about as you're running, that can certainly cause a little bit more stress to the muscles, the bones. Like it could cause stress fractures or things like that if you kind of let it go without doing anything. So that would just be something to kind of like piece out a little bit.
Yeah. And for me personally, I haven't in a while, thank God, but I always roll my ankles. Do you have any like suggestions as far as like preventing and or like trying to rehab it? Because I used to like Google all the time, like what's the fastest way to heal rolling your ankle? And I was like, I want to be back in like 2 days. Is there anything that is like a hack? Because I always just kept it moving. I felt like blood flow and like just keeping it fresh was working, but again, I'm not the professional.
Right. Well, no, you are right about that, though. I mean, in almost every case, too, similar to my thoughts on strength training, where I think it applies almost everywhere to a certain degree. I think just movement and, not resisted movement or maybe not even weight-bearing movement, but just like movement of the joint is good in almost every situation. If you roll your ankle once, you're more likely to roll it a second time,
right.
and so on and so forth. And as you do more of that, the more likely it is to happen. So 2 things you would want to look at there is mobility of your ankle, especially in the dorsiflexion, or like knees and toes kind of coming together. Because if your toe kind of points down more frequently, you have more of a chance of like catching your toe and kind of then the ankle rolling. So that range of motion and mobility is something to look at, and then just overall like strength and stability of those muscles that can kind of like catch that before it actually becomes a full roll.
Yeah, for sure. And the last question we ask everybody is, what keeps you going? Like, what's your deep why?
Yeah, I think for me, I just want to maximize my life and my potential. I think it's kind of like, you know, to quote the great David Goggins, like, you know, once you pass on from this world and, you know, you get to heaven's gates and, you know, God looks at you and he's like, oh, you did this, this, and this. Well, you also were supposed to do this, this, and this, and you didn't. I think that's kind of like my motivation too, is just trying to squeeze all the juice I can out of life, in every capacity, like fitness, health, my business, my career, like being the best physical therapist I could be, my relationships and my family. I just want to maximize all of those things. And I do think that when you put enough effort into one of them and you really do learn how to like endure hard things and difficult things and break through and ultimately get to your goal, I think you can start looking at the other aspects of your life that way too. Like relationships get hard. Like they do. Like running gets hard, and so do relationships, and so does, you know, going to work. But if you know that you're going to put your head down and work until you get to your goals, I think that can just have a trickle down effect to all aspects.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And it's like you kind of almost need to like excel in one area to give yourself the confidence to realize that you can excel in these other areas. And it's hard to like kind of really navigate it, but it's really just building like a leader and a person out of yourself that you admire almost.
Yeah, 100%. Like I want to be proud of myself at, you know, looking back at some point on my life and the things that I did prior. I want to be proud of that person. I don't want to live with regrets or be like, you know, I could have tried harder to, you know, be a better husband, or I could have tried better to be a better business owner or business partner. I want to put all my effort all day, every day into everything that I do. And you can't always do that, but the mindset and the mentality of, well, I'm going to put my best foot forward every day and try to maximize everything. I think ultimately, you know, at some point will make me feel like I did all I could. And that's really it.
Absolutely. I think it sounds like you got another marathon in your future, to be honest.
Maybe an ultra.
Yeah, honestly. You might be joining me in August. Yeah. But I appreciate the time, man. Yeah. I appreciate getting to know you, and wish you all the best.
Yeah, likewise too. I appreciate you having me, and whenever you want to have me on, talk more, I'm ready. So let me know.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah.